So our first speaker this morning is Dr. Tim Moore. Tim is a Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Community Child Health here in Melbourne. He's a leading thinker in Australia on child development, family functioning and service systems. Tim's team monitors, reviews and synthesises research literature on a wide range of related topics, and he has been the principal writer on numerous reviews, reports and policy briefs, and he's contributed a lot in my time at ARACY. I've been at ARACY for almost 6 years now, and the name Dr. Tim Moore pops up over and over and over again in the conferences that we attend, in the reports that we do, and in the work that we do. ARACY's been proud to partner with the Centre on numerous projects, and we're really grateful to have Tim here this morning to share on authentic engagement, the nature and role of the relationship at the heart of effective practice. Please join me in welcoming Tim.
Thank you very much, Charlie, for that warm welcome. Very daunting. Okay, no pressure whatsoever. So my topic here today is authentic engagement. And I'm going to start by saying that the professionals may seek to engage parents for many reasons. We might want to help individual parents with personal problems. We might want to help them support their children's learning, to help groups of parents manage shared issues. We might want to help communities of parents address common concerns regarding services and environments, or collaborate with parents in co-designing, co-managing and co-evaluating. So a whole raft of reasons. And to be successful at any of these, it depends upon the quality of the relationships that we establish. All of this work is relational. Now, obviously, this particular conference is focusing on how you help parents support their children's learning. But what I'm going to focus on is the process of engagement itself, on what happens and what is central to engagement. The work that we do is essentially relational, and we need to take on board exactly what that means. So what I'm going to look at is evidence regarding the role and nature of relationships, the neurobiology of interpersonal relations, key features of effective relationships, challenges in authentic engagement, and conclusions before I totally run out of time. There are lots of slides and lots of material in this presentation. Some of it we may need to skip through in order not to intrude upon Heather's time, but the full set of slides will be available to you on the ARACY website. Okay, role and nature of relationships. Why is this such an important aspect of what we do? There's a lot of work being done on the neurobiology of interpersonal relationships. That's some of the stuff I get to read, and what I'm sharing with you is distilling some of this information. Matthew Lieberman says, our brains are designed to respond and be influenced by others. We are wired to be social. That's our biology, that's our nature. The brain has a network that is devoted to mind-reading others, and we have an unparalleled ability to understand the actions of thoughts of those around us, enhancing our ability to stay connected and interact strategically. And when human beings experience threats or damage to these social bonds, the brain responds in much the same way as it responds to physical pain. That is, the same circuits in the brain are activated, indicating how important these bonds are to us. So the notions of broken hearts and the like have some biological basis. So research on the neurobiology has shown that our brains constantly communicate with other brains through subconscious high-speed pathways. And this enables us to register other people's feelings and enables them to register ours, which is why we can't fake being interested, caring or empathetic. We are intensely social creatures. Our brains are shaped by relationships for good or evil. And it's particularly true for children, but relationships continue to play an important role right throughout our lives. So we've got two modes of thinking, two ways in which our brain operates. I'm going to start by just telling you a bit about this particular approach, which is from Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics for work as a psychologist. And he talks about two ways in which the brain operates. System one, which operates automatically and quickly with no effort, no sense of voluntary control, generates the impressions and feelings that are the main source of our explicit beliefs. And system two, which operates deliberately and slowly, is only used when the situation demands it and generates our So system two is who we think we are. System one is actually doing most of the work. This lends itself to whimsical cartoons of this kind. System one racing ahead of system two. Mind you, it just reminds me of Dr Seuss and Thing 1 and Thing 2. Our brains, this translates into interpersonal communication, because our brains have two parallel ways for processing conscious and unconscious information. The first is the system one. It's a fast, early evolving, fast system. It's for our senses, our motor movements and bodily processes that we share with other animals. It's non-verbal, inaccessible to conscious reflection. And we constantly communicate with other brains using that pathway. The second is the set of later evolving slower systems involved in conscious awareness, and this eventually gives rise to narratives, our ways we understand ourselves, imagination and abstract thought. And the difference in processing speed between these two pathways is half a second. It takes 500 to 600 milliseconds, which is half a second, for brain activity to register in consciousness, but the fast system processes sensory, motor and emotional information in 10 to 50 milliseconds, which is virtually no time at all. So we've got half a second gap. During that time, our brains work like search engines. And it unconsciously scans our memories, our bodies, our emotions for relevant information, constructing our present experience based on a template from the past, and what we then see is what we think is objective reality. Whereas really our brains have been already processing, as the fast system works incredibly fast, so that by the time we become consciously aware of an experience, it's already been processed many times, activated memories and initiated complex patterns of behaviour, responses in ourselves, responses to each other and to situations that we are in. 90% of the input to the cortex, your thinking brain, comes from this internal neural processing, not the outside world. So we're doing a whole lot of processing there using these neurobiological, and this has extreme importance in terms of our relationships with each other. Lou Cozolino's accounts of this are probably as approachable as any. He says, like neurons, we send and receive messages across a synapse. You'll be familiar with the brain literature, which tells us about how neurons connect with one another via synapses. They don't actually connect. They get close, and they don't actually touch. The messages are transmitted through hormones and the like. Lou Cozolino says the space between us is the same. We've got a gap between us, but we communicate across it. It's the space between us, it's the medium through which we are linked together into larger organisms, such as families, tribes, societies, and the whole human species as a whole. And because so much of this communication is automatic and below conscious awareness, most of it's invisible to us. We don't know that it's happening. So when we smile and wave and say hello, these behaviours are sent through the space between us via sight and sound and smell, and these electrical and mechanical messages are received by our senses, converted into electrochemical signals within our nervous system, sent to our brains, and these generate chemical changes, electrical activation and new behaviours, and then back and forth it goes. So this is what's happening as we engage with one another. As we talk to one another, this is going on all the time. And that enables our brains to read the body and facial signals of others and to detect their intentions and their emotional states. They are recreated in us by virtue of the messages that we are getting that cross the social synapse. And these cues include facial expressions, pupil dilation, posture, tone of voice, odour, and the mirror systems in our brain, the mirror neurons that enable us to recreate those experiences and we don't know that it's happening. So if I can demonstrate, I don't want to do this to you. Can you do a full facial up here, please? Is it possible to get me up there? No? Okay. Oh, there we go. That's awful. Sorry. Okay. So we've got dozens and dozens of muscles in our face that combined can create thousands of expressions. We don't have control over them. So if I smile at you like this, then that is not something that evokes any kind of warmth in you or trust. And this is because I don't have conscious control of the muscles that convey a genuine smile. So you've got muscles here that do the crinkling bit around your eyes. In order to activate those, I have to look at you really fondly. And what happened is that a lot of you will find that you have automatically recreated that expression yourself in a minor way. We mimic. That's enough of that, thank you. In effect, our right brains are able to communicate directly with other people's right brains, independently of conscious communication. That's what's going on. And the right brain limbic areas that enable this grow rapidly in the first 2 years of life. So right brain growth is happening in the first 2 years of life, and that's when the positive exchanges with parents are so important. Hard to get good pictures of this. That's not a pretty picture, but it shows the backwards and forth that goes on. Here's another attempt. This is two people facing each other. We were looking down on top and we're seeing a graphic representation of their brain activation as they imitate each other. It's right brain to right brain. That's what's going on all the time. Okay, so why is this important? It's important because it tells us that from a neurobiological, a biological point of view, that's who we are, that's how we operate. And that the importance of these relationships for our mental state, our physical state, and our ability to relate to one another depends upon these processes. And that means that relationships and engagement are central to anything that we do, including the work that you are all doing, and that we otherwise may take for granted. There has not, in fact, been much discussion that I have heard of the issue of engagement in terms of authentic engagement at the conference. We're concentrating instead on what you do, and we're taking for granted something that's fundamental that we really need to be paying attention to. So the evidence for the importance of relationships comes from a variety of sources. So there are lessons from working with vulnerable families. We've got research on psychotherapy efficacy, research on effective help-giving practices, research on family-centred practice, family-centred care, research on family partnership training, on community practice, co-design and co-production, whole series of areas, all of which are converging to tell us the same kind of message. I'm going to cherry pick some of these kinds of findings in order to illustrate why these are important. This is one piece of work that we did a few years ago on engaging marginalised and vulnerable families, and that was looking at the research on what families tell us about what they need from professionals, what makes them pay attention to professionals, what makes them accept what professionals do, etc. And these are the things they say. They need services that help them feel valued and understood and that are non-judgmental and honest, that have respect for their inherent human dignity and are responsive to their needs rather than being prescriptive, allow them to feel in control and help them feel capable, competent and empowered, are practical, help them meet their self-defined needs, are timely, providing help when they need it, not weeks and months or years later, and provide continuity of care. Parents value the sense of security that comes from having a long-term relationship. We could unpack all of those kinds of and talk about them for ages, but my point here is that that the majority of them are relationship related. They are to do with feeling valued and understood. That's not to do with what you're delivering. That's to do with who you are in your relationship with them. Respect for their human dignity, allowing them to feel in control. All of these are to do with the way that you interact with parents rather than whatever kind of wisdom you're trying to impart or whatever kind of program you've got, whatever you want them to do. The way that you interact with them. Psychotherapy comes up with the same kind of message. There are two main factors which tell us about the efficacy of psychotherapy, or that are common to all approaches. All psychotherapy works with some people. None of it works with everyone. No methods of psychotherapy are really proven to be any better than any others. The thing that makes a difference are these: the Therapeutic Alliance, that is the joint working relationship between the therapist and the client, and the personal qualities of the therapist themselves, not the method, not the content of what they're doing. My favourite illustration of this comes from this particular study, Psychiatrists' Effects in the Pharmacological Treatment of Depression. So this is a randomised controlled trial of a drug, and they were doing a standard kind of thing where they compare it with a placebo, and they found that the drug did work. However, who the patient saw made a bigger difference than the drug itself. So 7 to 9% of the variability in outcome was due to the psychiatrist. It was only 3.4% to the drug, and some psychiatrists were consistently better than others. In fact, when they took the top third and compared it to the bottom third, they found that the top third did better with the placebo than the bottom third did with the real drug. You have to think about what that means. A drug is not meant to work in that kind of way. So there is the relationship. These authors conclude that we should consider the psychiatrist not only as a provider of treatment, also as a means of treatment. That's what we are. That's what you are. You are the means. You are a medium through which change occurs. The relationship provides that medium. Beliefs are also important. Both professional and parental beliefs play an important mediating role in whether anything effective happens, whether any change occurs. The parent has to believe in the intervention plan. This is the placebo effect. You have to believe that this is going to work. That's what placebo means, I believe. Belief in personal ability to implement the intervention. The professional has to believe in the efficacy of the intervention and in the parent. So all of that, that puts us back on us. We have to not only believe in the effectiveness of what we've got to offer to the parent, we've also got to believe in the parent's ability to be able to carry it out. Parallel processes also operate. Relationships affect other relationships. Our capacity to relate to others is supported or undermined by the quality of our own support relationships. The flow-on effect can be seen in the relationships between early childhood professionals and parents of young kids. We model for parents how to relate to their young children by the way we relate to them. So our relationship, your relationship with the parents that you want to work with really should have the same qualities as the way that you want them to relate to their kids. You are modelling that. There is a flow-through effect here. Relationships form a cascade of parallel processes, so the quality of relationships at one level shapes the quality of processes at another. People learn how to be with others by experiencing how others are with them. This is how your views and feelings of relationships are formed and how they can be modified. How parents are with babies or with their children, this is how we want them to be. We want them to be warm, sensitive, responsive, consistent and available, is as important as what they do. We need them to feed and change and soothe and protect and teach. Similarly, how professionals are, how we are with parents, respectful, attentive, consistent and available, is as important as what we do: inform, support, guide, refer and counsel. So modelling the characteristics is an important part of what we need to do. Overall, the evidence is clear. How services are delivered is as important as what is delivered. Outcomes are not simply the result of advice, take drug X or play with your child, but are determined also by the ways in which the advice is given. The manner in which support is provided, offered or procured influence whether the support has positive, neutral or negative consequences. It can have negative consequences. You can have the best program in the world. Deliver it in the wrong way and you will do harm. This is the message. One thing that strikes me about this is that those two statements come from two different sources. From Carl Dunstan and his colleagues in the US and from Hilton Davis in the UK. Now, knowing both those guys, they are totally different characters. They come from different intellectual traditions and they've come up with the same conclusions, which speaks to me about the rightness of those conclusions and how important this is. Community-centred practice also has these same qualities. At the community level, engagement and partnering involve the relationship between a service system, and the same principles and practices are effective in engaging and empowering communities at an individual level, are also effective at a community level. And that's a recent piece of work that we've done for Child Family Community Australia. Okay, key features of effective relationships. Relationships have a dual function. They're both a means to an end and they're an end in themselves. They're a means to an end in the sense that although it's through relationships that children and adults learn, develop and change, but they're an end in themselves. They don't only lead to a better quality of life, they are quality of life. They're justifiable in themselves. So relationships, they are the medium through which we transmit effective strategies to help families change the way that they relate to kids. This is the message. The relationship is the medium. It is a necessary but not sufficient condition. You have to have it first of all. If the parent doesn't feel they are listened to, then they will not listen to you. Parents seem to be disempowered. In many cases, you seem to know a lot more. There's one way in which they're very powerful. They can take no notice of you. And they will do that if they don't feel if the relationship is not set up in a way in which they feel they can trust you and that you understand their circumstances. Having a positive relationship with a parent or parents is a necessary but not sufficient condition. You have to do something intentionally and purposefully to build parental capacities to provide their kids. So this is not saying that the content side of what you've got to offer is not important. It's saying that it doesn't come into play until you've got the relationship going. Then you can use that as the medium through which you can drive change. But you can't just have a relationship and everyone feels happy with the relationship and then think you've done your job. You still have to change. If the parent doesn't change in their capacity to support the kids' learning, you haven't done your job. Engagement is a necessary but not sufficient condition for creating change or for being an effective helper. It's the medium through which effective learning and change and programs can be delivered. There's a caveat. You can't treat the relationship simply as a means to an end. You can't fake an interest in parents and their views because they'll know. And they'll know because of what we were talking about before. Because of that, the neurobiology and the way those messages come across, they will know. They will be taking in cues from the way that you say things, the way that you look at them, the way that you hold yourself and so on, to tell to what extent you are being sincerely interested in them. So although we may think, well, I've got to be interested in the parent because if I'm not interested and then they won't listen to what I've got to say, if you do it like that, then you risk not being sincere. Research indicates that help receivers are especially able to see through help givers who act as if they care but don't, and help givers who give the impression that help receivers have meaningful and choices and decisions when they don't. Very important message. Instead, you have to treat the relationship as an end in its own right while being mindful of the ultimate goal. So this is what authentic parent engagement. Karen Mapp talked about that yesterday as important, and it was very heartening to hear how strongly she stressed that. You have to somehow master the art of meta-thinking, or operating on two levels, that you are here, present in this moment with this person while being conscious of ultimate goal at the same time. Effective relationships have universal properties. This is my list of 10 qualities: attunement and engagement, responsiveness, respect and authenticity, clear communication, managing breakdowns. All relationships break down, then that's not a disaster. Kids learn. Emotional openness, understanding others' feelings, empowerment and strength building, assertiveness and limit setting, and building coherent narratives. Challenges to authentic engagement: how to know and manage your own emotions and values. There will always be some parents and situations we'll find hard to understand and you'll have a reaction to, so understanding our default reaction is important. You've got to learn to understand your own. And these reactions are part of your unconscious processes. You need to learn how to manage them so they won't compromise your response. You can't get rid of them. They're just part of you. How to stay in the moment and manage distracting thoughts. Your mind goes the whole time. It's important to learn how to manage those thoughts so that they don't interrupt your attunement. Mindfulness strategies are good for this. How to let that, oh yes, I'm thinking about what I've got to do after this, just let that thought go all the way through. How to maintain authenticity is what we need to, our real feelings and intentions are being broadcast to other people. We need to be aware of that. How to build parental capabilities. Using strength-based practice is harder than it looks because our default mechanisms are to see faults in people rather than the positives. How not to try and fix every problem. If you give people space, they will find answers to themselves. Check out this YouTube video if you've never seen it. It's not about the nail. Just Google "it's not about the nail," it comes up. How to know if you're engaging parents effectively. You've got to get feedback. You've got to constantly check back with parents. Is this still working for you? Is this still the way that you want to work? Is it still the most important thing that you want? How to build genuine partnerships. You need to trust the process and trust the person. These are powerful messages. And how to plan and design services with parents. Use co-design and co-production strategies. Best example I know are our Tasmanian Child and Family Centres, and my colleague Paul Pritchard, after the break, will be giving a presentation on this, as will Lynn Wiley-Watson. There's a couple of presentations there about this work, which is highly impressive. How to develop and maintain skills. Relationship building is something that you can train yourself in. You can get better at it. There's family partnership training, coaching training, motivational interviewing. I think Karen asked people yesterday how many teachers here had received training in personal relationships. I don't think anyone answered that one. It is a skill. It is trainable and it is important. And you also need to think about this as a lifelong learning kind of approach. How to reconcile relationship-based processes and evidence-based practice. I'm going to skip through this lot because we are running out of time. We may get a chance to come back to it. This is some work that we've done for the Department of Health and Human Services locally. Jill Callister on the first day mentioned the roadmap to reform. This is our answer for how you might deal with that. Can't tell you any of that. Conclusions. She's putting up notices to be telling me how long I've got. Okay, conclusions. Engaging and partnering families and communities are quintessentially relational processes whose success depends upon the nature and quality of the relationships. Without such relationships, there's a much reduced likelihood that our efforts to build parent capacity are being successful. The process of engaging is a necessary but not sufficient condition and needs to be complemented by evidence-based approaches and building capabilities of parents. Engagement and partnering are the medium through which interventions to change behaviours are given. But we can't treat that merely as a stage to go through to achieve changes. We have to do it authentically, with full take-up to occur. And the skills are well understood and trainable. Parallel processes implies that we need to be supported by people who are modelling these things, and we need to model these kinds of relational processes to the people that we work with. While everyone agrees that relationships are an important aspect, this doesn't mean that we must pay much attention to them. We need to approach this purposefully, not mindlessly or casually. This is work. This is an important part of what we do. We have to trust the process, have faith that engagement and partnership strategies will be productive, and we have to trust the person. Have faith that the parents have the capacity to be valuable partners. If we do things to people, if we direct and control and have a covert agenda to change them, we'll get compliance or resistance. We won't get any building of skills or resilience. If we do things for people, we do charitable work, no expectation of them doing anything, we'll provide temporary relief. Again, we won't be building any skills or capabilities. If we do things with people, if we partner with them, if we share power with them, there'll be benefits for the parents who will build confidence, skills and self-reliance. If we do things with and through people, partnership with a shared agenda to promote child skills and participation, will get benefits for the children, family, creating positive environments for all. Thank you.